So we're going to begin with this movie analysis. So it's about Apollo 13, which is the third lunar landing mission. And it has three astronauts that they ventured into space, but things didn't go as planned. So we're going to see here how they faced this conflict, their whole entire team, not just the astronauts. So there are five tenets that helped them define their organization as great, and the way they handled the conflict and the way they were successful in accomplishing and solving the problem was great. And these five tenets can help us define how great they were, and they stood out from any organization that can just be considered good. So first we must define what great is. A typical good leader or a good organization would just be results oriented. They want to know the numbers at the end. They want to know the profits. Whereas a great leader would be focused on the process. How do we get there? What kinds of steps do we need to take to get to that point? How do we need to better train our team? We need the right people. We need um to focus on this process, this legacy that we want to leave. So great defining great would be a team that would be true to their vision. They rely on all of their members to work the problem, just like the Apollo 13 crew did. And in times of conflict, just like when they had a little issue or it turned into a big issue on the shuttle, something happened with the oxygen tanks or something. In terms of that conflict, they're powerful, they're effective, and they do what they're supposed to do, and they do it well because they expect the unexpected. And so great actually evolves over the course of the mission, and that's the whole point of this today, because certain steps, just like in these tenets, allow them to be even greater. And in the face of like maybe questioning if they were great, we were proved that they were right, and we were right too, that they were great. So, um, just a quick review. Level 5 leadership would be someone who's humble. It would be the executive at the top, just a level 5, not level 4, who's typically well known, but in level 5, it's someone who's humble, and their greatness endures. Without them, the company still functions perfectly. Getting the right people on the right bus. First who and then what. So it's getting the right people on the bus. The wrong people will slowly trickle out because the work culture becomes too high standard, so they eventually leave. And then getting the right people in the right seats. So this means the right positions. And so the hedgehog concept is when you have three things: what you love, what pays well, and what you're good at. And if you combine all of these, you have a win-win situation here. And what that means is having a mission, core values, wanting a unique contribution, and depending on the time, the money, and the brand, all of this is converted into a big, hairy, audacious goal, so that you can focus on one thing and you do it well. And lastly, you're turning the flywheel. So this can also be a definer, a tenet of being great, because it involves the momentum that really carries along the team without with just leaving it alone. There needs to be no more meddling, because the team, if it's built well and organized, it can work by itself. So the first tenet that we talked about was defining great. So in Apollo 13, we can see how great is defined as we explore Gene. So Gene was a really important guy in the movie. He said a couple of things. He said, "What can we do?" So people were asking him what they needed, um, that it was a difficult problem, and all of these factors, but he led them to focus on what really mattered. What can they do? And instead of trying to guess, they wanted to make decisions that were accurate and precise. And basically, that failure isn't an option. He pushed his team so hard because he knew that he expected better of them. He didn't want them to have made mistakes or not tried hard enough. And so that's why he says that failure is not an option. And even when people gave up hope on them, he said, we're still working on it instead of just, oh, we predict that we're not going to be able to make this back because he believed in his team. And that's one of the important aspects of how great the organization is that they don't give up. So, level 5 leadership. Gene Kranz, that's the last name, Kranz. Gene Kranz was the NASA flight director of the Apollo 13 mission, and he was just one of the faces of the leadership, but basically everyone was a leader in that they voiced their opinions and they participated because if anyone could provide any sort of help, any opinion, they all had to get together and voice everything because some people had different knowledge areas and expertise. So as they all joined together, they built up this teamwork. And so his leadership was above and beyond because we don't even know really who he is. He doesn't have probably a Nobel Prize, and he isn't a face that is reckoned, but his work there was phenomenal. It was so like legendary. And the way he organized his team was, he kept it together. He had a common goal. He made them have a common goal. He pushed them. He yelled at them because he wanted them to get their work done. And he wouldn't take no for an answer basically. And two, he had a responsibility that every single person was responsible for their jobs, and he wanted them to do the best that they could do so that he could complete the tasks that that needed to be done and basically get the astronauts home. He had to make precise, planned decisions. No, none of that crazy decision and of guessing to get the astronauts home. And so competence basically means that he only accepted the best work, as I've just said. Um, and like I said, he yelled at his team because he knew the experience they had, and he even called on more manpower and knowledge because he wanted everyone that could possibly help from NASA, everyone there, everyone working as a team. He even started off with saying, "Let's stay cool, people," because it it's a phrase that helps people keep calm, but it's also strategic. And later we'll see how this was a moment that started the momentum and started getting it going, started getting the mentality that we can do this. And this is just like any other protocol. We work as a team, we try to accomplish the goal, and we try to solve the problem. So getting the right people on the bus, sorry. Couple people or a couple groups that were really important. So mission control. Got a lot of guys that were there helping um part of the team. They were all separated into task forces. One of the guys was helping make a carbon dioxide filter. Um and they have Capcom, Philo, Booster. They did their tasks and they even slept on the ground because they were so tired. Ken Mattingly, he was supposed to be on the Apollo 13 flight, but they were scared that he was going to get measles, so they didn't want him anymore. But he ended up still being part of the flight because they called on him to try to simulate the situation that was going on. He helped design a reentry plan and use the minimal power that they had because they didn't have much power. So he, like I said, he was still part of the mission, and he was actually a factor that ended up saving their lives because he was one of the right people. They never wanted him off, but it was just for security, and so again, they still had him as part of the mission. Lastly, Jack Swigert. Everyone was kind of doubting in the beginning. You could see that the other guy, Fredo, didn't really want him because they were already a team. But when he was suffering carbon dioxide poisoning, he still managed to perform the necessary calculations, help the team by prepping the shuttle, and he couldn't even see well, but he stayed strong throughout. And he was even allowed to pilot the ship back home because that was his specialty. So, yeah, they got the right astronaut as a backup. And I think that's what they excelled in as well, having people there, to back up to in any situation. So, the hedgehog concept. The big, hairy, audacious goal is a powerful mechanism for stimulating progress. So it's not just any goal, it's like a huge, daunting challenge. So I put here before fly to the moon. That was their big, hairy, audacious goal. Imagine this is, well, back in the day, and this is just so modern and so revolutionary and so high tech to fly to the moon. But now they've changed that big, hairy, audacious goal, and the goal is not a solution because it seems impossible, as you can see in the pictures. How are we going to get them back home in a limited amount of time when they're running out of power, when they're dying of carbon dioxide poisoning? Over here in the other picture, that was an example of how they how to make a carbon dioxide filter. We need to make this, we put it into this, using only this. It's just very like crazy to think about and just hard to accomplish, it may seem. Um, so now the goal seems to be pushing that vision and revolutionizing the vision of, oh, we're just gonna accomplish, exploring the beyond, taking risks. But now it's like we have to find the solution for that. So finally, turning the flywheel is the last tenet that makes the Apollo 13 mission great and is reflective of how great NASA is because of the preparation. So the preparation was important because they were testing everything. They were testing to make sure that the the shuttle could fly and that everyone was healthy. And in preparing, they had to make some sacrifices. And it was a selfless choice on behalf of Jim Lovell, who who had to kick out one of his friends, his fellow astronaut, Ken, because he didn't want him to come down with the measles in space. And that was a sacrifice because he really wanted him on there. But in the end, it was well because Ken ended up helping them come back home. And they also sacrificed Jim Lovell's desire to go to the moon, because who doesn't want to go to the moon? He was practically there. That was his dream, and so he had to make sacrifices just to get back home, just to be able to survive. Lastly, or the last two, team building. So if the team doesn't communicate or the team isn't bonded, then they won't be able to benefit their team and when they make their decisions, and that'll lack the strength. So at first, Jim Lovell was the glue that held the team together of astronauts because he was the leader, he was more experienced, and the other two were just not really connecting. But after that, we see that the flywheel makes them connect on their own and they don't need Jim anymore. Um, Fred thanks Jack at one point and appreciates his work even though he's like slowly dying from carbon dioxide poisoning. And Jack returns the favor of animosity by calling Fred Fredo. So and I remember at a point they all joined together in medical solidarity when they removed their little medical monitors. So that just shows like they don't need Jim Lovell. They're a team all together. And they probably didn't even need the flight coordinator guy, Gene, because everyone was working together. All the task forces were coming up with solutions, and boom, 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 everything was starting to be put into place. And towards the end, they even they even felt that that was their best hour. Someone said that the last hour is gonna be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced, but Gene Kranz goes, without due respect, sir, I believe this is gonna be our finest hour. And that right there is the definition of what it means to be great.